Well, we appreciate the singers now. I was going to bring my jug to blow on, but I think Danita hit it.
Here's your green one.
It's supposed to be empty when you blow on it.
Oh,
I was wondering if it was.
well, felt a little nudge to change passages while we were singing, so I'm going to go with the nudge. Turn with me to 2 Chronicles 7. Very familiar passage, one that's used quite often to kind of as a formula, if you will, for revival. Even though in the passage itself it doesn't mention revival, it does mention God does make a promise, and a lot of times people will take the promise and they say, oh, well, that means. And sometimes, well, that means is correct, and sometimes it may not be correct. So before we jump to well, that means, we need to first find out what does it mean. And once we know what it means, then we can look at the next step. But 2 Chronicles 7, we'll begin with verse 13. And this is on the occasion when the temple has been completed under Solomon, and they are dedicating the temple, and they've done massive sacrifices, and they've had days of celebration and worship, and everything's going great. And God speaks, and he says this in verse 13. When I shut up the heavens, so, excuse me. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, if my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then always look for those little words. It's like the word but, B-U-T. A lot hangs on that. Then I will hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. Now, what's he going to heal the land from? The pestilence, he said, I'm sending. Well, why is he sending that pestilence among the people? Because they've strayed from him. They've strayed from the covenant. They're going, usually the thing that got the most trouble was idolatry. They would go into worshiping other gods, mainly the Canaanite gods, because that was the gods their neighbors worshiped. And that was one of the reasons why God told them in the beginning, don't leave anybody there. When you move in, wipe them out. And some people ask, why is that? And God said, because they will always influence you, and they'll always be a stumbling block to you to try to lure you into idolatry. And we know from reading the story, they didn't wipe them out. And guess what happened? They became a constant stumbling block to them in trying to lure them into idolatry. So this was going to be an ongoing problem. But this is where God gives the promise. If I shut up heaven so that all this bad stuff happens, there is a way to stop it. There is a solution to the problem. And the solution was for God's people who are called by his name will humble themselves and pray. That sounds like a pretty good start, doesn't it? You would think that would be enough. But then he says, and seek my face. Well, how is pray and seek my face different?
Praying is a conversation, seeking is actually going after it.
Very good. Pray. I pray, like when the red light takes too long, Lord, help this thing get over. I pray about all kinds of, let Krispy Kreme be open now. You know, I pray about all kinds of things, but that's not really seeking the Lord. Seeking the Lord is when we orient our thoughts and our energy towards the Lord. Okay? So it's more than just saying a prayer, in other words. Seek my face. Well, okay, so he said you got to humble yourself first. Pray. Seek my face. That should be plenty. No, he said, and then turn from their wicked ways. Uh-oh. You mean we got to change? Afraid so. He said, if you do all that, then what? I'll heal your land. You know, we live in a sick land right now. This country is very sick. And I think God is waiting on his people to take this to heart. I think he's waiting on his people to do what he said here, which is very simple. Start by humbling ourselves. I've never seen a time when there's been more pride in the church over stuff they shouldn't be proud of. They just, you know, if any Christian leader is up to the caliber of being worthy of mentioning charisma or Christian, whatever it is today or whatever, they always have this little caption with them, mega pastor. Mega pastor did this. Mega pastor says that. Mega pastor will tell you how to be a success like him. Mega pastor. Why do we do that? We do that to puff their pride. You want to be a success like mega pastor? Then do this. Go to his workshop, buy his literature, and he'll show you how to be a mega pastor. So get through the humility. Get to humility. Get through the pride. Pray. Prayer is something that often doesn't get a whole lot of attention in a lot of churches today. And he's not just talking about prayer before the service or prayer over the offering. He's talking about giving ourselves over to prayer. Or as Paul said, pray without ceasing. Now, of course, you don't go around like this with your eyes closed because you'll run into stuff, can't drive, and stuff like that. So you learn how to pray without ceasing by maintaining a constant conversation between you and God. Just like Jesus did. So Jesus had those times when he would come apart, and then he had those times when he would just be in the process of walking around and God would speak to him because he had this internal conversation going with God. Pray and seek my face. I don't know that a lot of that goes on much anymore. It's hard to seek his face and be knee-deep in prosperity doctrine and self-help. See, seeking his face doesn't go with self-help messages or a Christian psychopath. Self-help, seeking his face requires a type of message that doesn't appeal to what we want to be true. Seeking his face doesn't tell us each week how wonderful we are and how lucky God is to have us. Seeking his face, I remember back, we were talking about the 70s earlier, I remember back, I was trying to remember when it was, 70s, 80s, somewhere along in there, where there was a movement in some circles of people who were going after, let's see, what did they call it? Deeper life or something like that, where it was very heavily scripture, seeking the face of God, scripture, sincere discipleship. It wasn't a discipleship movement, but it was something like along those lines. It was kind of like the contemplative life, if you will, of pursuing God through the serious study of scripture, the serious observance of the spiritual disciplines. Richard Foster's book on the celebration of the disciplines is still popular. And it was written, I guess, late 70s. You remember, John D?
I haven't read it. I'm not familiar.
Late 70s, early 80s, and it's still popular. And it was written from the perspective of Puritan, I believe. I think his background's Puritan. So this idea of seeking after God, it's more than just going to church and sitting through an elaborate presentation or singing worship songs or hearing cute little messages. Seeking God is something where you orient your life towards it. It's becoming what is called in the New Testament a serious disciple of Christ. And I've used the example in here before of somebody who wants to be a bodybuilder. That's something you have to seek after. You don't get that by working out once a month. And nobody's going to be a bodybuilder if they hang out at Krispy Kreme all the time. Because you have to orient your diet. You have to make working out sacred. I mean, it's got first dibs on your time. It's usually a set time of the week. I know some people who do it, and they're there every week. And I don't mean for 10 minutes. 2 or 3 hours a day working out. Now, I told you what my workouts used to be like. I used to cap them off with sitting in the massage chair, and then before long, I just went there to sit in the massage chair. And it felt so good, but it wasn't working out. I rejoined the gym this week. I did not put the massage chair option on my membership because I knew what would happen. I knew where I would be before long. I'd be in the massage chair or on that hydro massager thing that you can lay on, and that would be my workout every week. But if you're going to be a serious bodybuilder, you can't do that. You've got to seek after it. You have to give yourself over to the pursuit of it. So it means you're going to be in there when you don't want to be there. It means you're going to be working out when you don't want to work out. It means you're going to eat some nasty looking stuff to me. Drinking all that mess, all them milkshakes and powder with raw eggs in them and stuff like that. I got one thing to say to that. I don't want it that bad. And since I don't want it that bad, guess what? I won't get it.
You're right.
Same is true with God. See, some people like having a casual relationship with God. They like this idea, well, I got enough God to make it into heaven, and that's enough for me. And God's called us to serious discipleship, and they haven't got any intention at all of ever being a serious disciple. I downloaded some pictures the other day I was going to use on PowerPoint, but I want to make sure that we can do PowerPoint here. But it was like these guys who were seriously working out, and they had muscles on top of muscles. And then there was other guys like me who were sitting by the workout equipment, laying back in recliners, sitting there eating chips and stuff like that. And I'm kind of like the guy the other day. They asked him if he worked out. He said, only if I can eat my ice cream while I do it. And, that's not serious working out. But the same is true in discipleship. Serious discipleship involves seeking after God. It's not just learning a few Bible verses and going to Sunday school when it's convenient and in church once a month. It's a way of life. So seek after, and then what was the last one? And turn from their wicked ways. You mean change is involved? You got it. Change is what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to talk about it. I thought about several different angles to use in talking about it. But one angle is right across the street. I just saw this a minute ago. That house used to belong to O'Ree Hardy, and I forget his wife's name. I think it was Janice, but I'm not sure. O'Ree was a mechanic, great mechanic, master mechanic. He worked at Sears back when Sears had an auto shop, and he was the head mechanic there. But you see that little shop back there in the back? You see it now. You used to, you couldn't. The little shop is where he worked on cars for people who didn't have much money. And so he would work out there every night to midnight or so on the cars of people who couldn't really afford to take their car to the shop. And that yard would have cars lined up all the way up that yard. And I know that because my dad used to take his cars there. And you knew where to park. One side of the yard was waiting to be worked on. The other side of the yard was waiting to be picked up. And so when you would pull in, I think it was on the left, you would park on the left. Sometimes you would be parked all the way out to the road. And every night when he got home from work, he'd pull one into the shop, work on it, and when he got done, he'd pull it out and he'd park it on the right. So when you were going by, if you saw your car was parked on the right, that meant it was ready to pick up. He did that for years. We took our cars there when we first got married. And then the cars got a little too sophisticated, and you had to have computers and stuff. And he didn't have all that, so that gradually began to go away as it got down to just people who drove old clunkers like us. And then one day, Mr. O'Ree was gone. Stepped on into that big garage in the sky. And you know what? Things changed across the street. Did his customers like it? No. But life is about change. And things are going to change whether we like it or not. And, I could today, if I wanted to, take my car because my check engine light's on, as usual. And I could pull it over there and park in his yard and just sit there and wait on Mr. O'Ree to come out and work on my car. You know what? That's not going to happen. Because change is part of life. And we all, if I know a lot of you's like me, you don't particularly like change. I mean, I don't mind things changing as long as they stay the same. and we'll just call it change, but it'll basically stay like it's always been.
I can identify with it.
But see what happens, and I'll tell you what kind of got me going this way in a minute. But what happens is if we're not careful, we understand things change in the natural world, but things change in the spiritual world too. The message never changes. Okay? The message of the gospel is the same message today that it was 2,000 years ago, and anybody who says they can come up with a better version of it is lying. There is no better version. It is what it is. Okay? The message stays the same. But the methods must always change. It's just like we're going through a lot of change here in the building. And I know, I didn't have anybody say this, but that I heard anyway, but I have a feeling that some who've been here a long time, when they first walked in and saw that new floor and that beautiful paint on the walls, probably went, this is different. I don't know if I like this. Can I tell you that has nothing to do with the message? That's just methods. All we're trying to do is get a building here that's more conducive to people coming and who don't really know much about us, and when they walk in, they don't go back to the 70s. And that's exactly what's happened back there. It's been updated. And it needed updating. We got some stuff that's going to happen in here. We just got to get the money together for it. We're going to take this carpet out here in the center, put down some new flooring. I know with those buckling places, folks say, why can't you just stretch it? Because it won't stretch. You know why? It's so old, the backings come off. You can't stretch it then.
What happened was it's been flooded 3 times.
Mm-hmm. So, some things are going to change. That's just part of life. Now, what happens though if we're not careful, just like with physical things, when we don't want things to change, we tend to hold on to them. I know my dad was just as bad. He'd say, he'd hold up a bolt or something. He'd say, I know as soon as I get rid of this thing, I'm going to need it. And so he had jars of screws and bolts and stuff like that. But here's the thing, when he got to where he needed, he never could find it. But he had it. He had it in a jar. And that, you know, those jars, I guess my sister took them, I don't know, but he had a room in his house, a pantry type thing, and he's had all kinds of jars on those shelves of little things that when he needed, he couldn't find. But he just knew one day he would need it.
He was led by the Lord.
But what do we call it when somebody is constantly taking in stuff, but they never get anything out? Hoarders. In fact, they made a show about it. Y'all ever seen the show on TV?
It's awful.
Man, some of what they hoard, I don't know about. But that is in the way they're doing it, it's a psychological problem. It has to do with an emotional attachment that the person forms with stuff. Usually because they're isolated from their family, they have no relationships in their life, and this stuff becomes like a person to them, becomes like a real relationship to them. So it's an emotional attachment to this. So that's where the hoarding thing comes from, okay? But I want to offer today something that may not be as much fun, and that is this. I think there's such a thing as spiritual hoarders. Spiritual hoarders are people, not the message, but they just hold on to stuff. Oh, I remember back when God did such and such, and God's got to do it that way again. So I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to hold on to this over here. And that can never change because that was so wonderful back yonder. And we can never change this carpet over here because so-and-so laid out there for 2 hours. I remember that. So we got to keep this. And
we cannot change the floor in the Sunday school room because they work so hard. We can never change it again.
you see, the thing is about hoarding, and I saw a little video on this yesterday. A guy who bought a hoarder's house at auction, sight unseen. And so his wife or girlfriend had the camera, and she was following him when he walked through his new house for the first time. And so he said, I just bought this house, and he walked up on this porch, and there was junk everywhere. And he said, well, I guess I bought all this too. And so he went and opened the door, it wouldn't open. He turned the handle, and the handle broke off in his hand, so he started pushing against the door, and he said, this door will not open. And so he went around, he found the window, he crawled in through the window, and he found out why the door wouldn't open. There was too much stuff piled in front of him. And there was junk all over that house.
I wish I'd bought that house.
I said junk, not treasures. But there was broken toys, there was empty cartons, there was, just all kinds of, and stuff that smelled. And he went through that first floor, and everywhere he went, there was just junk everywhere. And he said, I wanted to sell some of this on eBay, but none of it's worth anything. Because it was just pieces and parts and stuff that had no value to it whatsoever to anyone but the person who lived there. And so he walked into the kitchen. He said, welcome to my kitchen. Junk everywhere. In fact, as often happens with hoarders, they get so focused on accumulating stuff, they had let the maintenance of the house go. And they had a leak in the roof in the kitchen, and all of the ceiling had fallen in. And he said, well, maybe my upstairs is better. So he walked upstairs, and he peeked around the corner. He said, nope. Junk everywhere. He said, well, maybe the attic is better. Surely they didn't put nothing in the attic. And he went over there and tried to open it. He said, this door won't open. He said, well, maybe that's a good sign. They couldn't open it either, so they couldn't put nothing up there. And his wife or girlfriend, she started laughing behind the camera. She said, yeah, that's it. And so he kept pulling. They finally got a hammer and he knocked the hinges off, the pins out of the hinges, and took the door off. And he walked up and he looked in the attic and he said, "Well, I got that wrong." Junk everywhere. So, well, maybe the basement's clear. So he went down in the basement. He looked down and he said, "No, wrong again. Junk everywhere."
You're ruining my day. I'm so bad in this house.
And it was so bad that they had let the house get in such bad disrepair. Part of the basement had fallen in. And so it was just junk and collapsed structure, and the whole house was a mess. But see, that's what can happen to us spiritually.
Yes.
Is we just keep accumulating. I got to have this experience. I got to have that experience. Oh, that's a special one. I got to hold on to that one. And we get all these little pieces and parts. And then we do the thing, and this is where I've been wanting to go the whole time. And that is this. We get to the place of saying, "God, I got to have something from you. I need a fresh encounter with you. I need something fresh from you, God. I need for you to intervene in my life. I need for you to intervene in my church. I need for you to intervene in my life." And we pray and we seek and we do all the things we just read in 2 Chronicles 7:14. But heaven's silent. And we wonder, what in the world is going on? Well, I want to give you something today based on a little video I watched this week that really spoke to me on this subject, and something I just want to pass along to us to consider. I guess y'all are familiar with Steve Harvey, right? Steve Harvey, the game show guy and talk show guy. Well, he shared this story from his own life this week, and I thought it fit well with what we're talking about. Steve Harvey recently told a story from his life when he was working to buy a car. He was a young man still living at home at the time, and he had just obtained his first paying job. And so he's believed being optimistic would help in achieving his goal. And his goal at the time was to buy a new car. So each paycheck he would set aside money and tell his mother, "I'm going to buy a new car." His mother responded, "I know, son, but your old car is on blocks in the backyard." Steve said he knew his old car was in the backyard. His intent was to someday work on the car and get it running again. But over time he lost interest and the weeds grew up around the car, and so he decided to just get a new one. The exchange lasted a few weeks between Steve and his mother, and as always, she responded the same way. He knew his mother often would say something without actually saying it. So one day he had enough. His mother gave her usual response about his old car in the backyard, and Steve asked, "Why are you so negative?" Steve told his mother that he was trying to be positive and wished that she would be positive too. His mother answered, "Son, I know you will get a new car someday, but you have an old car in the backyard that has to go first, or you won't have anywhere to put a new car." Steve said he called a friend with a tow truck, and they towed the old car away. He chopped down the weeds, cleaned up the oil that dripped on the cement under the car. The area looked like new when he was done. And within a few weeks, a new car was sitting in that spot. You see, and this was his point, and this is the point I'd like to make for us today. We do 2 Chronicles 7:14 many times because we do want God to do something in our lives, in our church. We want to see God heal our land, heal our lives, heal the lives of those who come. But sometimes before God does anything, He's going to require us to get the old car out of our own backyard first. And that old car can be a habit that needs to change, a behavior that needs to stop, a behavior that needs to start. Whatever it is. It may be holding on to, well, God did this 100 years ago and He's got to do it again. I can tell you, whatever God does today is not going to be a repeat of what He did 100 years ago. First of all, the times are much different. The people are much different. The expression of it's going to be much different. I personally think this time, if God really starts doing a major work on a massive scale in His church, it's going to be to reclaim the truth, because the church has gotten so far away from the truth. And it needs to be brought back to the truth. And I don't mean feel good, God's going to bless me up and down all sides and stuff like that, but I mean the truth. Before God can give you the new car, the old car's got to go first. And so I was thinking about that in my own life, and I said, Lord, that's a truth for us. Because we're all in here praying for something. And it may be the reason why heaven's been silent is we've still got an old car in the backyard that needs to go. So my encouragement to us today is this. Look in your backyard. Look at your life. Has God told you something in your life that's got to change or got to go? I'm going to tell you, He's not going to do the new work until we take care of the old work. And whatever new we're looking for from Him, there's probably something we've got to change in what we already have. I know He's pointed out things in my life that had to change. I made one of them last week. Guess what? I didn't want to. Made two of them. One last week and one the week before. Didn't want to, but the old car had to go before the new car could come in its place. So I want to encourage you, not only in your personal life, but here at the church, as we're praying for God to move and do a new work here. Don't get nervous if things change. The message will never change. The message will always be what it's always been. But the appearance of the building will change. Other things will change. Who knows? I have no intention of doing this right now, but maybe the way we do church will change. Do a service changes. If the Lord leads, we're going to do it. Because we're not going to let an old car in the backyard of our lives keep us from getting the new thing God's got for us today. And I hope that's your prayer as well. You need a new marriage? Get rid of that old junk in the backyard of the way you've been relating to each other. That doesn't work. It always surprises me when folks come to counsel and say, we've got to have help. Really? What's going on? We fuss all the time. Well, my immediate reaction to that is, well, stop. But it's kind of like, we can't help it. Yeah, you can help it. Y'all just sitting in the old broke down car that doesn't work. And you're getting angry because it doesn't work. You got to get rid of the old car so God can give you the new car. Father, I thank you. You can speak through anyone. You can even speak through a television personality that we don't know and he doesn't know us, but Lord, you can still speak truth. And Lord, I thank you that you are making us aware of the fact that you do want to heal our land. You do want to heal our people, but we have to do it your way. And Lord, I pray that today we won't allow some old broke down clunker car from the past that we refuse to get rid of, that we are insisting on hoarding, that we won't allow that to prevent us from receiving what you have for us today. And Lord, help us to see and break any emotional attachment we have with something that you're saying has to go. Help us to get a glimpse of hope, Lord, that what you're going to do is much better than what we've known. And Father, I thank you that you are still in the miracle working business. And so, Lord, I pray for each person here today, Lord. Everybody has their own issues, their own needs. They have things that they're concerned about. And Lord, if the holdup on intervention is they're holding on to something in their life that needs to go, I pray that you'll give them clear knowledge of what that is, and then give them the power to do what needs to be done and to get rid of the old clutter. In Jesus' name, amen. Bless you. Have a great week.